So good morning, good Sunday morning, everybody, and welcome to the Political No-Brainer podcast, where we move past winner takes all politics and into conversation. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. Today I've got Kevin Howard with me, author, writer, political enthusiast as I am, extraordinaire. And we are waiting on our other guests, Kevin and Charlie. Hopefully they'll join us. I haven't heard back yet, but we're ready to go. And like Kevin said just a second ago, we've got some great stuff to talk about. You want to kick it off, Kevin? You want to talk whatever you want to talk about? Kick it off. You want to mention your book first, or what are we
No,
going to
no.
talk about?
Well, certainly thank you for even mentioning my book, Onward at Last, the 2024 presidential election edition, which was published last October 2024. But yeah, we could get into that eventually. But here is the story is that the world is coming to the great state of Alaska as President Trump and Putin are getting together for a summit. And I think this conversation today is going to have an international flavor to it. I would love to hear your thoughts about what do you think this summit is going to be about? And the agreement between the two presidents is that Putin is coming here first to the United States, to Alaska, and then President Trump is going to Moscow. So this is going to be bookends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what do you think is going to come out of these two summits, and what is that going to be the implications for the country and for the world?
So my biggest concern is, as always, I consider Ukraine a sovereign nation. So, and Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, is not a part of these conversations. That's my biggest concern. I'm not knocking the idea of President Trump trying to bargain, trying to negotiate peace with Putin. I am, generally speaking, it takes an alliance, it takes an understanding, it takes more than just two presidents. Usually, you want to involve Europe in something like this, some European leaders in something like this. Generally, who knows? You might want to involve Asia in something like this. You might want to involve again, India has come at the crosshairs of this. They're buying oil from Russia, and that's keeping Russia's economy alive. So, generally speaking, you want to bring in as much as you can to the table. When you have two guys, and it's only you're not really covering the whole equation. Not knocking the effort. I'm always have to preface that as much as I'm not a fan of Trump, I'm not the decision maker. Trump is. So, but that is my biggest concern is, and Zelensky has said there will be no land for peace. This is our land. And I tend to agree with him. I don't know that he's in a position to make that demand, but I would like to see an end to this war. So basically, that's my answer to your question is I am a little hesitant about the approach.
And I could appreciate that, but I just think it's really important, certainly for each of us and all the listeners who happen to be blessed to benefit from this conversation and hopefully participate in their comments, below the conversation, that we frame our comments and our thoughts within the context of the history that informs us how we got here. Okay. When you talk about Zelensky, it's important to understand that Zelensky's authority as the leader of Ukraine was because he was elected and that he is operating outside of the Ukrainian constitution. He is no longer the legitimate leader of Ukraine. He has suspended elections. Okay. And so the problem is that if you're talking about Ukrainian sovereignty, right? And that is steeped in the will of the Ukrainian people, okay? You see that how Zelensky is leading Ukraine is detached from how he was elected. So if you go back to his campaign, I cannot express this enough. Zelensky's primary campaign pledge was to enforce the Minsk II agreement, which is a peace treaty that had been negotiated with Russia, with Putin and Russia, that was sponsored by Germany, France, and Poland. and that was endorsed by the United Nations Security Council, which of course includes the United States, and that Zelensky was elected to enforce that agreement, which would have resolved the issue of Donbass, which would have remained a part of Ukraine, but ethnically Russian Ukrainians would have been protected from ethnic cleansing. They would have been protected to be able to practice their Russian Eastern Orthodox faith. They would have been protected to be able to speak Russian, right? This is these okay. So that was how Zelensky was elected. Okay, since he became elected, right, he has chosen at the influence of the United States and NATO to become pro-NATO, anti-Russian, and to go down to this dangerous path of going to war with Russia, right? This is okay. And so fine. He has not, since he changed his positions from what he was elected to do as the leader of Ukraine, he has not stood for a new election. So we have no sovereign expression of the Ukrainian people, right? That endorses what Zelensky is doing. So to what extent should he participate? He is talking about refusing refusing to meet the demands of Russia in a context where Ukraine is about to lose. They are losing the entire battle line in Ukraine right now is collapsing. The Russians are about to over the next few months, they are absolutely defeating Ukraine. So we're no longer talking about whether or not Ukraine is going to give up the five provinces. They're going to give up the five provinces because they've lost the five provinces, right? Right. And in a context, again, that this did not have to happen. It was not the decision of the Ukrainian people to go to war against Russia. It was not the decision of the Ukrainian people to not enforce, the Minsk II agreement. That was Zelensky at the influence of the West, the United States, the European countries, and stuff like that, and that's what has put them in this spot. So where President Trump is and President Putin is right now in terms of meeting in Alaska is to resolve a dispute that the Biden administration fully in cooperation with the predecessor administrations in terms of George W. Bush, in terms of Bill Clinton, in terms of Barack Obama, all of them have endorsed this eastern expansion of NATO all the way to the Russian border over the direct objections of Putin and the Russians as a threat to their national security. And the result is it has destroyed Ukraine.
So
So now,
hang on, let me bring Beth in on this. So that now you've heard quite a bit of Kevin talking. When we started the conversation, we talked about how do we feel about Putin and Putin and Trump meeting in Alaska and then ultimately having a secondary meeting in Moscow. And and here's Charlie. So let me bring him in. Let me bring him in on this. So hey Charlie, hey Beth. So
Hey,
hey
good
Charlie, you
morning.
got us? You hear us?
yeah,
Hey, how about
I
you,
think
Charlie?
so.
Charlie, you're there you go.
You back?
Right.
Hey,
Another button
so
item.
so we started off the conversation with how do I feel about Kevin asked the question, how do I feel about Putin and Trump meeting in Alaska and then a secondary meeting in Moscow? I expressed my concerns that first of all, Zelensky's left out of the meeting. That's my biggest concern. Second of all, I believe it takes more than just the three of them. Even I'd like to see some European leaders on the at the table there, and even maybe China. Uh, but my question is just like Kevin phrased it to me. How do you guys feel about Putin and Trump meeting? And at least my biggest concern is leaving Zelensky out of the meeting. Then Kevin had his point that this is all. How would you say it? This is all Russia's right to do what they're doing, right? Essentially.
Uh,
Did they already
well,
meet? I thought it was
No, they're meeting
scheduled.
next week,
Oh,
right?
okay.
But
on
I'll let you
Friday.
express your opinion. Just let's start with the question. How do you guys feel about one at a time? How do you guys feel about Zelensky, Putin, and Trump meeting? They haven't met yet. They're going to meet for the first time in Alaska next week, I believe, on very
On
soon.
Friday.
Friday, and then follow up in Moscow.
Go ahead, Beth.
I think they should absolutely include Zelensky. Two authoritarian leaders getting together to choose how a sovereign democracy is going to end up. And I don't think I think Zelensky should be included. And I think Trump should explain why he can't end the war in 24 hours or 15 days or a few weeks or however long he's given us from, now.
Well, obviously, I think some dialogue is always good. So, I think it's positive that they're talking. I think, ideally you'd want as many of the primary characters there, and certainly Zelensky at the top of that list. But I agree with Jeff. Also, would it'd be nice to see other European leaders. I certainly think I don't know if I'm phrasing this right. I think the United States, Trump as the president, has the right to have this meeting, considering that we're basically funding the war. So it's going to be a process. I don't expect them to come out with an agreement after this first meeting. It's going to be a long process, which I would imagine will involve the European leaders, will involve Zelensky. If he's going to remain on this hard line that they're not going to surrender any land, that's just not it's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. I don't think it's fair that they're losing part of their territory, but I just don't see there ever being a peace agreement where they go back to the borders were drawn up before the invasion.
And then Kevin had also mentioned he felt that Zelensky was operating out of his realm of election. And I find that ironic because Putin's operating out of his realm of election. If you remember correctly, Putin had termed out. And Medvedev stepped in as prime minister or president of Russia. And then Putin, this was like a little game of whack-a-mole, where then 4 years of Medvedev and Putin was allowed to run again. And since then, there's been 96% election victories, just incredible popularity levels of Putin, just fascinating popularity levels, 96, 90%, 8 victories. So when and then you mentioned broken treaties that Zelensky ran on the premise to be president of Ukraine, ran on the premise of being a part of essentially the Moscow Pact, if you will, not necessarily. And then he kind of switched gears to being a part of the NATO Pact. The reality is that all along, all these years, that the NATO pact is the one that people are choosing hand over fist. So as far as treaties being broken, as far as understandings being broken, we might as well just throw that conversation out the window because let's go back to the Camp David Agreement where Palestine was supposed to have been established 30 years ago in the West Bank. There was none of this. Let's make it a classic example of be careful what you ask for. You may just give them this piece of land in Gaza that's now the most densely populated area in the world and probably the most bombed out area of the world at this moment in time. So let's not talk about treaties broken, promises broken, campaign promises broken. Trump also ran on the premise that he had no understanding of Project 2025, and we have implemented it chapter and verse from day one. So the understanding was he did have no understanding of it. That does not come as a surprise to me, but it was in place ready for him to sign into law. So that was a bit of a misleading statement when he said he had no idea what Project 20. So as far as treaties and understandings and Zelensky running on the premise that he was going to be a part of the Moscow Pact, essentially, there again, that does not default to Ukraine not being a sovereign nation.
Well, I would take exception with the idea that the Project 25 was implemented by the signing of law. It's been completely done via executive order. There's been
executive order,
zero legislation. But anyway, that's
right.
Kind of away from the
That's
point.
actually true. Yeah. Very true.
And I hear you all there, but okay. So the issue in terms of Ukraine and the potential resolution of that conflict in Ukraine is a complex enough issue for us to conflate other issues like Gaza and other treaties and other debates and what other people ran on. I'm just saying if we can just stay narrow to what are we talking about in terms of Ukraine? And so, Coach, I hear what you're saying. All I'm saying here is, first and foremost, no one is claiming that Putin is operating outside of the Russian Constitution in terms of his leadership. There's no question it is not a liberal democracy in Russia. There's no question about that. That's absolutely true. It's also no question that Ukraine is no longer a liberal democracy. That the pro-NATO, anti-Russian forces in Ukraine have never been elected. That the only reason it came to power is because there was a violent overthrow of their last democratically elected leadership, right, in 2014. And that ultimately, when they had the next ultimate actual election, which was Zelensky's election, he was elected guaranteeing, claiming that he was going to enforce a peace treaty with Russia, the Minsk II agreement. That's all I'm saying, right? And so if we're talking about sovereignty, what is the will of the Ukrainian people? The idea that the will of the Ukrainian people is to join NATO and to go to war and to be anti-Russian. That the will of the Ukrainian people is to ban the Russian language from Ukraine, to ban the Eastern Orthodox Church from Ukraine, to ban Russian culture from Ukraine, where there's so many ethnically Russian Ukrainians, right, is simply not true. There has never been any type of election or any type of government that was elected on that basis. Okay, so let's not conflate Ukrainian sovereignty. Ukrainian sovereignty has been destroyed by outside forces, namely the United States and the European powers, manipulating the will of the Ukrainian people for our benefit. And the result has been this war in Ukraine. So if you're talking about if Zelensky wants to have legitimacy, have an election, and let's see what the Ukrainian people say. We also, in terms of whether or not they want peace with Russia, whether they want to have an ethnically cleansed culture in Ukraine, even though their whole history is intertwined with Russian culture, right? Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. So
let me ask this question though: if Russia, and I'm going to ask everybody this question,
yes, please.
If Russia decided we're going to have a free and fair election, just hypothetically speaking, of course we're talking hypothetics, do you think? And it was like here, where you have primaries and you have parties nominating a candidate. Do you think either Dmitriev or Putin would be elected the next president?
Well, again, I
Does
think
anyone?
Okay, well, Coach, you want to send us down that path, right? You could ask that question in many, 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 many countries.
I'm only
around the
asking
world.
Just because we're saying Zelensky is operating out illegally. We're saying essentially Zelensky, I mean, Trump, other people have said it, Putin has said it, not Trump. Zelensky is operating illegally. I'm not going to sit with Zelensky. He's not the leader of Putin. Can Zelensky not say, I'm not going to sit with Putin? He's not really the leader of Russia. I mean, you say I bring up too many variables, but when I look at the world, I wonder who really is the Congo leader.
The entire world recognizes Putin as the leader of Russia. I mean, that's not a debatable issue. It is a debatable. Literally, the Ukrainians have a constitution. Zelensky is operating outside of the constitution. He was supposed to stand election. He suspended election. Right? What do you mean? That's why he's operating outside of. That's why he's. By the Ukrainians' own constitution, Zelensky is illegitimate. This is what I'm saying.
But we're talking about a legitimate constitution, where in fact we're talking about an illegitimate constitution in Russia.
What do you mean?
Because Putin has finagled the system for 20 years now.
No one claiming. I mean, there is no one claiming.
Because they're scared to death.
Look.
You know what happens to Putin's adversaries? Their planes get shot out of the sky.
All I'm saying to you here is that we have a constitution. We defined our constitution. The Iranians have a constitution. The Chinese have a political structure.
Okay, let's let somebody else chime in.
I mean, my gosh. I mean, no one is questioning whether Putin is the legitimate leader of Russia.
Let's let someone else chime in. We shared our opinions.
I've heard you say now a couple of times that Zelensky was not, that he suspended the election. He did not. It was postponed under martial law because they're in war. Like, that's not I'm talking to you. Yes.
Beth, we had an election in 1944 while we were in the middle of
I'm
World War
talking
II.
about
We had an
Zelensky being democratically elected for Ukraine.
Yeah,
But
the thing about it is just because you're in war doesn't mean you suspend your election.
we don't know that
Under
that's
their
not in the
constitution,
Ukrainian
it is
constitution.
under
There it
martial
is.
That's
law.
not true.
It is.
Okay. So
Please.
everyone go check to see
Just
if
Google it.
under the Ukrainian constitution, did Zelensky have a
Zelensky
duty
did not.
to stand election? Yes, he
He did not
Fine.
suspend the
This-
election. It was suspended under martial law.
No. The
Okay, I'm going to
establishment
ask
of martial law.
ChatGPT. I'm going to look for some verification here because I can't do this on my own. I can't answer this question.
Because you said it twice that he was not democratically elected, and he was.
He was democratically elected to enforce the Minsk II agreement. That's what he said he was going to do.
I'm pulling the ChatGPT card right now.
To pull the ChatGPT card.
Under Ukrainian law, did Putin have the right to suspend elections because the country was under attack?
Zelensky.
Hang on. Let me start over. Okay, it's God, I'm getting too old for this. Under Ukrainian law, did Zelensky have the right to suspend elections because the country was under attack and at war?
Great question. Did it tell you that was a great question?
Was that you?
The idea.
Does anybody else have access to ChatGPT?
The idea
is
that
I'll look it up.
Okay,
here, can you do it, Beth? Because my ChatGPT, my whole phone is screwed.
The idea is that the Ukrainian constitution authorizes Zelensky to suspend
But we have to. We're just going to answer
elections.
this one question. Hang on.
Right. I'm only clarifying the question. The idea that the Ukrainian constitution authorizes Zelensky to suspend elections because they are at war. Right.
Exactly. That's the question.
Right. That's the question. I just wanted to clarify it. Exactly.
Okay, Beth, can you do your ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
the U.S.
I'm
Constitution doesn't do such a thing either.
Specifically, does Zelensky have the right to suspend the Ukraine election because they were at war?
Yep.
Yes. According to the Ukrainian constitution.
Yes, under Ukraine laws, President Zelensky did not need any special permission to suspend elections during the war. In fact, holding elections under martial law is expressly prohibited.
That is the bylaws of the Ukrainian country. We cannot argue that point any further.
Do you need me to read it again for you?
No. Hey, Beth.
Yes.
Hey, Beth. The specific question was about the Ukrainian constitution. I understand that the parliament in Ukraine have passed all types of laws. I'm talking about the Ukrainian constitution that governs the realm of which their laws are legitimate.
Yes,
right?
The constitutional continuity. Constitution Article 108 mandates that the incumbent president continues in office until their successor takes over, ensuring there is no power vacuum, even if the president's term has expired.
We can't. Well, that's how we're going to have to use ChatGPT as a clarifier.
Okay, when President Trump refuses to leave office,
but now
this is Ukrainian constitution.
It's no.
Dude, please.
No. I understand. You think that what you just said is self-evident. I understand.
I only ChatGPT.
I didn't ask about whether or not if there's a vacuum, there's no leader. That of course the Constitution doesn't allow for there to be no leader of a vacuum. That's not the question. The question is whether or not that they are prevented from having an election because they're at war. It's not true. He chose to suspend the election. He chose to declare martial law. Many countries have elections during war.
But under their
Ukrainian law,
it does not.
Martial law legislation in Ukraine.
It does not.
Martial law 2015.
Let me ask Charlie a question before. Let me go to one new question.
For them to go to martial law.
It is prohibited under law.
Hang on, guys. Pause. I'm going to ask Charlie a question because Kevin asked a question. So Charlie, okay.
Yeah.
So we've literally dropped the terminology in the most recent and in the last few months news constitutional crisis in America, because essentially the Supreme Court has gone along with everything Donald Trump has said. So we've essentially had to drop the term constitutional crisis. So as a Democrat, as a person who argues Trump, argues against everything Trump does other than the legitimacy that he's president, because I am a person that can acknowledge free and fair elections. He may not be, but I am. I've said he's gone through the steps of going to the United States Supreme Court. He is the most litigious businessman in history and by far the most litigious president in history. He has gone through the steps. So we're no longer in a constitutional crisis. So, Charlie, let me ask the question. If by some logic, Donald Trump 4 years from now says this country is at war, because essentially the world is at war, what argument do we have? I mean, we've waged economic war on the entire world. 300 million people has waged economic war on 7 billion people. We've demanded that Costa Rica buy as many cars from us as we buy coffee from them. I don't know that they'll be able to do that, but we've demanded it or they'll be penalized. So now we're at economic war. The world is on fire. We're involved in every single one of the wars one way or another. So if Donald Trump claims we're at war and this election is suspended, what do you think to be the outcome, or what do you think the legal or whatever? What is your opinion on that hypothetical topic?
Well, I think it's related to maybe the most important aspect of the first half year of his second presidency is the word emergency. In using the word emergency, he's allowed himself, he's created this situation where he's been able to unilaterally impose these tariffs that are completely changing, the world market. Saying, because it's very clear that he only has the right to do it in this way if it's under this emergency clause. I forget the exact terminology, but it comes down to that we're in this continuing state of emergency, and for that reason, he's allowed to do basically what he does with executive orders at a much wider scale. That's eventually going to make its way up to the Supreme Court. It's starting to already. So you're talking about kind of the same thing. I clearly, I don't think he would have any, issue with doing exactly what you're saying, doing something like, well, we're effectively in a state of war, and by that nature, then we can suspend elections or do something to remain in power. I also believe that if and that time comes in 2028, and it looks like it's the Democrats remain so far underwater, even against all the issues that the Republicans have, that if he believes there'll be a transition to Vance or Rubio or someone in that group there, he knows he'll basically effectively. It's just like you talked about with Putin and when he wasn't president, but he really still was. I mean, that's kind of the same situation Trump is going to set up.
Totally. That's exactly right.
I mean, until the day he dies. So whoever it is, it's just going to be a figurehead. If MAGA is still strong enough to win an election, I don't think he wants to be president. He just wants the power. And so if he can set it up in a way that he doesn't have to do any of the the boring president things, and he can basically just remain on the golf course while still wielding as much power, he'll do that.
So we're in a scenario where we're arguing the point that it could very well be in Ukraine if Zelensky said, okay, let's have an election, and he doesn't get reelected. Because first of all, you have to realize the Ukrainian people are not afraid to protest, where they are afraid to protest in Russia. I mean, people know, like I said, generally Putin's adversaries die in fire.
How are people doing in Russia, Coach? How are the Russians doing in Russia?
Well, at this point, they've lost 1 million soldiers. Whether or not they lose the war or win the war, a million people are not coming home to their families.
Time out.
If 1 million people are not coming home to their families, that country's doing terrible.
Coach, that is, please don't put out that kind of information.
It's out there.
It's not true. Anyone who's following the war in Ukraine, the geopolitical analysts who show the maps and know that the Russians haven't lost 1 million people. That is insane. This is what Ukraine has lost, right? No,
you muted yourself.
Trump has said the same thing, the same kind of ridiculous numbers. There is no one outside of the Western propaganda machine who has validated the fact that the Russians have lost 1 million soldiers. That's not true.
I
It's
thought it
simply
was
not true. So please don't
total.
put, huh?
A million lives were lost in total with Ukraine
Yes,
and
most of
Russia.
them Ukrainian. I mean, most of them are Ukrainian.
Can
It is not true.
anybody
The
can
Russians are
anybody
absolutely
not
winning this war.
anybody else here other than Kevin, because Kevin has his point of view, does anybody else have a point of view on the severity of human life lost from Russian soldiers from what they've been reading?
I thought it was just significant on both sides, from my
It's
understanding.
not. Glenn Deason, Mearsheimer, Alexander Makuris, all these geopolitical analysts who examine the battle lines every day, 7 days a week on their podcasts and stuff like that, have been reporting over and over again. It is simply not true that the Russians are losing anything like the number you're talking about. It is the Ukrainians who are losing that number, right? They're losing every aspect of this war. Every battle line is being pushed deeper and deeper in Ukraine. They are they are about to lose the war.
So you wouldn't say that when people say they're inching their way, they're gaining ground, but it's
It's a
minimal.
collapse. It's a collapse going on.
Okay. So let me ask. I'm going to ask a new question because I think okay, recently, and I'm going to ask this question to everybody, and I want everybody's opinion. Recently, I'm going to start on a new topic.
Yes.
Recently, Donald Trump has gone to the Secretary of Defense and said it's time. It's not time. I want a plan placed in front of me to start bombing drug cartels. We have designated them as terrorist forces. We have the right to bomb them. So, and this is my question really. Is this, okay, not a classic example of putting the cart before the horse? Because this is a president that graduated Wharton's business school. He is a guy that should understand the theory of supply and demand. If we're not buying these drugs and the rates we're buying them, would these drug cartels have the engine they have to bring these drugs over here? And then, so is that where a classic example of what we put in that? And what does anybody think of the idea of bombing drug cartels? Because, there was once a movie and it gave me an understanding that the drug cartels literally moved out of the countryside of the countries they're producing drugs and into the cities just to prevent the idea of being bombed, because we can't really bomb cities where innocent people are everywhere. So they moved out of those villages. So now we're literally again re-engaging the idea of bombing drug cartels. So let's just get on to that, because this is the kind of thing where old people are like, these goddamn drug dealers, we need to just bomb them. They wanted to bomb the South Bronx, some of these MAGA conservatives. I mean, so let's just talk about bombing Mexico City. I mean, that's my question. Anybody want to take it from here? Anyone want to answer?
All life is precious. All life is precious. I don't agree with bombing, just like we weren't going to put alligators and snakes in boats at the border. Like, that's just ridiculous. And yes, supply and demand does play a big part of drugs coming across, but it's been on forever. Like, we're going to be at war with drugs as long as there are people on the planet. That's my opinion.
So we shouldn't be bombing drug cartels.
Absolutely
Kevin?
not.
I agree. We should not be bombing drug cartels.
Okay.
I think we should be dealing with the fact that we should stop drugs from coming in our country. We should be dealing with we treat this as an addiction, and if people need help, people need that we need to invest in that. And yeah, but no, we shouldn't be bombing anyone's country. We shouldn't be bombing anyone. No, we shouldn't be bombing the drug deals. I totally agree with you,
Charlie. Any particular opinion on bombing drug cartels? They are designated terrorist organizations, 3 in particular. Now, can we just bomb them?
Well, I don't think it's a very good idea. It's the visual image of us conducting this thing so close to our own borders. I mean, we're talking about Mexico, right? So, I can see the appeal for people who are so frustrated with the massive amounts of especially these synthetic narcotics, where most of the precursors are made in China, and China does really nothing to stop that shit from being used. But and it's so with the synthetic stuff, it's so much easier, so much cheaper to produce, to distribute, and it's so much deadlier. And so it's kind of like the image is appealing to people, but it's a lot more complicated than us just flying in there and bombing some drug labs. You're getting some really murky shit there. But
So this is
I don't think that'll stop him from doing it if he decides he wants to do it. And that brings back to also just the thing, just to put a cap on Ukraine and the war and those talks, that I have no doubt in my mind not exactly, but in general, how it's going to happen. Because what's going to happen is Trump, through this meeting with Putin or several meetings, or however the negotiations go on, he's going to get to the point where he's decided that he knows what is a decent peace proposal, and he's going to force it on Ukraine. And he's going to be like, it's that, or we're going to suspend all military aid. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So there's no chance that Zelensky is really going to have a say in this. There's no chance that even the Ukrainian people are really going to have a say in this, because they can't sustain, they're barely sustaining as it is, as Kevin said, and they certainly can't do it with reduced support. Europe cannot pick up enough of the slack. And so if Trump gets to a position where he's like, well, this is the deal, and I'm the smartest person in the world anyway, and so this is, the Ukrainians, they're idiots for not taking it, and so they're either going to take this or we're going to stop all aid. That's how it's going to.
I agree with Charlie, but I want to throw this out to the group. I mean, do we not recognize that George W. Bush announced in the spring of 2008 the intent for NATO to expand eastward all the way to include Ukraine, and that Putin, as the leader of Russia, communicated directly with the U.S. ambassador to Russia, right? That if they do that, if NATO expands to include Ukraine, right? This is what this whole issue has been about. This will be the Russia considers this an existential threat to their national security that they will go to nuclear war to prevent. They communicated that 17 years ago, right? And we did expand NATO all the way across Europe, and it came down to Ukraine. And this plausible deniability nonsense about Ukraine wasn't going to join NATO, when the Russians expressly appealed to NATO to let's negotiate in December of 2021 to make sure to resolve the security question of Ukraine joining NATO, because Russia will not stand for that. And Biden refused to make that commitment, right? So therefore Russia attacked them. Right? Because what are we doing? We were building secret bases in Ukraine and arming them as if they were a member of NATO. So, I mean, this is why we're in this spot. So, yes, Ukraine has been destroyed. But why? How? Right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. They've been destroyed because we were intent on trying to make Ukraine a part of NATO. And the Russians told us what would happen if we did that. And we have been unable to defend Ukraine. They have defeated NATO.
But here's the thing is where literally the foundation, the purpose of this podcast is we come to the realization every time we go circular on any topic that this is an antagonistic world. War is, as the Marine General, I forget his name now, war is for profit. No. War is for profit.
Oh, yes.
War
I know
is
who you're
a
talking
racket.
about.
War
It's
is
a racket.
And
yes.
So when we come to this realization that Bush said we're going to expand NATO, Putin said this is essentially a violation of our sovereignty. If you expand NATO, this is essentially, Putin said essentially, inadvertently, if you expand NATO, this is a violation of our sovereignty. We're going to go to war. There was never, and I never seen an acknowledgement, whether it's been a discussion or not. I've never seen an invitation to Ukraine. I've never seen anyone in NATO agree to the idea of Ukraine joining. We go on this tangent that still in all, Ukraine is a sovereign nation that Putin rolled into intentionally. He made it clear. He amassed his troops at the border. He said, we're not going in there. This is just posturing. And then he rolled in. And we've addressed it. Everybody faulted Biden for sending weapons over. When Arab nations rolled in on Israel, we sent weapons over,
Don't
and
do that,
Nixon was
Coach.
hailed as
Don't
a
do that.
hero.
Don't do that. See,
It's the
that doesn't
same
add.
thing.
No, it's
Sovereignty has
not.
one
No, 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 no.
definition.
Every one of these geopolitical issues are complex. It doesn't help the try. That doesn't help the conversation. All I hear what you're saying. You keep on saying that as if this thing is not about NATO. The former Soviet Union stood down and they made it a condition of them supporting the reunification of Germany as a member of NATO, that NATO would not expand east.
But
Since,
what is the threat that NATO what is the
oh, okay,
that NATO
here, Charlie, here's the thing, okay? 300 years of conflict between Europe and Russia, all of them have been European countries attacking Russia. Okay? There's a reason why, after World War II, the Warsaw Pact was formed. But in the middle of the Warsaw Pact nations, all those Eastern European nations that the Soviet Union controlled as a security buffer, Austria, the Red Army moved out of Austria in 1955. Why? Because the Austrians agreed that they would be neutral, that they would not join NATO. Right. The security buffer is there because European countries attack Russia. They did it in the Napoleonic Wars. They did it in World War I. They did it in World War II. It cost the Soviet Union over 20 million people. So hell yes. The reason why you have a security buffer is because the European countries attack Russia. It has never been that Russia is attacking Europe.
What do you?
Right? So,
what's the one thing in common with all those wars and battles that you just mentioned? They were all what? Pre-atomic age.
no,
Everything changed. Everything changed after we entered the atomic age. So since that time, I don't see any example of NATO being aggressive in terms of
Charlie, I hear what you're saying.
Sovereign states. It's always been a defensive alliance.
Charlie, I hear what you're saying, but that is not the interpretation. That ADD approach, like the atomic age or technology, has changed the history and the historical lessons. Have you ever hear Putin talk? Most people around the world are steeped in the history that got us here. Right. That was what okay. So all I'm saying to you here is no, from their perspective, it did not change that now it's the atomic age. From their perspective, the threat between Europe and Russia has always been from Europe. And it's still from Europe. Because here's the thing. So they agreed to stand down and to gather their nuclear weapons to Russia, right? Okay.
As much as I want to chime in, hang on, go ahead.
But hold on, let me just finish the sentence, Coach. Yes, right? Okay. They did that in 1991, 92, and stuff like that. And they agreed to support the reunification of Germany, a country that killed 20 million Russians. Soviet citizens, right, in World War II. They agreed to that reunification on the condition that NATO would not expand east, that the security buffer there would be in place. And since that time, NATO has expanded to absorb every country in the former Warsaw Pact and 4 provinces of the former Soviet Union. Who is pressing who? How is this defensive? They finally went to war when you moved to their border. They didn't go to war when you brought Poland in. They didn't go to war when you brought Romania in. They didn't go to war when you brought Turkey in. They went to war when you went to their 2,000-kilometer border with Ukraine. And they told us 17 years ago that they would do it. And still, we take the position that, this was never about NATO expansion. But where has NATO expanded? Putin has been in control of Russia since 2000 for 25 years. Where the hell has Russia expanded? But where has NATO expanded? NATO has expanded all the way across Europe to start absorbing parts of the former Soviet Union. Who is the aggressor?
It's because people like democracy.
No. It'd be one thing, Charlie, if people got a vote on these things. It'd be one thing if they got a vote on these things. Take a look at Finland. Because the Finns never voted to join NATO. Okay. But I can tell you we have the happiness index. We've been doing it for about 15 years, right? What the happiest countries in the world. And there's all these deep data metrics that support these questions. Well, over the last 10 years, consistently, top one or two happiest countries in the world is Finland. And for that entire period of time, they were NATO neutral, a border country to Russia, to Putin, while they're winning the happiest country in the world, right? Okay, now they're going to join NATO. Let's see where they start ranking over the next years.
So what I was going to say before, and you said let me finish, and I wanted to let you finish. I was going to express that I wanted to let you finish. I am not going to respond to any of this. I'm going to go on to a new topic because I have to agree that we're almost going to have to agree to disagree. That the expansion of NATO somehow is antagonistic. I agree with Charlie. It's not. I'm not responding. I'm just saying I agree with Charlie. It's not. There was a choice. People felt democracy was the better choice. Period. I want to go on to a new topic. And the new topic is Charlie just posted with his brother on Facebook, pointing a finger gun. Is that antagonistic? Because here we go. This is a big question. And I loved it. I also had the question, are you guys twins? But I thought I'd leave that one out of the podcast. But
what's the dispute? What was the dispute?
No,
Coach?
the dispute is we are in a state of Florida with a stand your ground law. And there was a concern by Jeb Bush signing in stand your ground law into law that a scenario like Trayvon Martin scenario would happen. So we have this community leader essentially, or wannabe community leader, patrolling an area. He says there's this black kid, and I'm going to use the word because that's essentially how he would have had to report it. You got to get a description of the kid. So whether he reported it or not, there's this black kid roaming around this neighborhood. I have a friend that lives in another neighborhood right by next door. She says kids are always cutting through her backyards. The police give him specific instructions. Stand down. We're on our way. We are the police. This is me now over elaborating. We are the police. We have many ways of addressing this young man rummaging through people's backyards. We have taser guns. We all have two guns. One's a gun, one's a taser gun. We don't just have guns. If we can't seem to get this kid to stop jumping over fences into many people's backyards, we can tase him at some point. We also have the idea of communication where we can coordinate the capture of him. But this kid didn't stand down. This kid took it on his own to approach this other kid. This other kid felt as threatened by him as the other kid felt threatened by I don't know how to say it, but they both felt threatened. They got into a fight, and this wannabe community leader, wannabe police officer, killed him. And this is where we get to these points in time where we're bombing drug cartels and other nations, including where Charlie just mentioned, one of the biggest drug problems is China. So now we're going to bring this thing over to China and start sending drones over to Chinese factories that are making synthetic drugs. All these extreme conservative policies. And I am by no hard the diehard liberal that says defund the police or any of that other crap or everybody should have free health care. I'm not that one. But all these extreme conservative policies, stand your ground, and all this other shit that's coming up for the next 4 years, we're deporting people that have every right to be here. Is there any time where a person that people say MAGA is a movement of extreme that want to see all this, but there is Republicans who are starting to veer away from this kind of crap. And is there any point in time where somewhere in America the feeling is let's meet in the middle is my point, is my question. And if you have an opinion on stand your ground, if you have an opinion on self-defense, is this threatening? Is pulling a finger gun? If I look at some guy in a nightclub and go, and then we're in a stand your ground state, and he says he pointed a finger gun at me, I had no other choice but to go to my car, get a gun, and shoot him, because all I knew is if I went to my car and I was looking, he shot me. I mean, where do we go from here?
It's complicated because, standard ground continues to evolve and change even in Florida. I have a case I just started working on last week. And I still haven't fully wrapped my head around it either as the detective I'm working with, but it starts off with a confrontation. You got two guys, it's like in a food truck area, and they both have their little crews with them, groups of people, right? And the incident starts where subject A pulls up his shirt, and it shows the guy that he's carrying. He's got a gun, jammed in his pants there. And the guy, clearly he initiates it. He's the first one to draw, so to show his gun. The guy walks away to his car gets his assault rifle, starts walking back towards the guy who initially threatened him with his. The guy who initially threatened him now opens fire directly at him. And then he responds by shooting back. Now I'm trying to figure out, A, can I even charge the first guy with attempted murder for shooting at that guy when he was, when he's walking back to him, he's walking with his rifle, but his rifle is down. So he's not pointing it at the guy who initially pointed his gun at him. So, you know, with standard ground, part of it is if you can, it used to be, if you can escape, you know, if you have the means to walk away, you should be able, you should walk away. It's required that you walk away. So if you're not in your home, if you're out in public, you're in an area where there's no advantage, and that you can't use standard ground to say, well, you know, if you had other avenues to end the situation, you're required to take them. That's now changed, and it's evolving, as you said, it's evolving more to a farther right position where it's, you know, it's really kind of turning the streets into the Wild West, where no one has the responsibility to back down. You know, so it's a complicated issue, but it is changing, and in my opinion, not for the better. It's changing in a way that's going to make you know, these, you know, it's already turned the Wild West out there down here in Miami. I mean, it's pretty bad out there, you know.
So I have to ask Charlie, wasn't
the
standard ground an evolution of the castle doctrine where you could only really do?
Yeah, that's where it started. Like I'm saying, it evolves, and it's expanded and changed over the years, where it's opening it up more and more. And like I said, I don't know the latest one. It wasn't that long ago they made another change to it, but it was a change that put, you know, gave you more of a right to arm yourself, to you know, to shoot at someone else. You know, it's a very complicated issue, and it's very difficult to litigate. I hated standard ground hearings.
Oh yeah, it's become difficult to litigate, Charlie, because we've moved the line. We've started to allow the notion of self-defense can be preemptive, and this is where it got dangerous. The idea is, if I think you're going to attack me, I have a right to attack you, right? Right. That wasn't the standard before George W. Bush, and you know, seriously, it started in that era.
And it becomes a question for the jury. It's a reasonable question. So it's right. Like, were they reasonably threatened? Did they reasonably believe they were really threatened?
But see, that's the whole thing. You know, if a person lifts up their shirt and shows that they have a weapon, right? That is okay. The question is whether that is a reasonable threat. Because again, here you have a dispute going on between parties, and the person is saying, I mean, I don't know the nature of the commentary going back and forth, right? But at some point, the person says, "Hey, by the way, this is it's getting heated. I just want you to know I'm carrying," right? Right. That is not okay. In my opinion, that is not necessarily a threat, right? Just as you said, Charlie, the gentleman goes back to their vehicle, which means they had a way to get away. Right. They were not being forced to confront, right? Anything that happens when he came back with a gun, right, it should not fall under this notion of stand your ground. But just to the extent that the slippery slope has moved in that direction, it's because this notion of you are allowed the activation of the threat because you thought you were threatened. It doesn't matter if it's actually true. It doesn't matter if two other reasonable people would look at the situation and not see that. As long as you felt you were threatened.
Oh, no, there is a question. The question that goes to the jury is it reasonable to feel threatened in that situation? So it's never going to be a black letter law type thing. It's always going to be a question for the jury. Yeah. So, and then in Florida, you know, the Florida statute for assault is exactly what you're saying. It's all about, you know, it's word or action. Pulling up and showing that you've got a gun jamming your shorts to someone in an aggressive manner is always going to be filed. I'll always file that charge, and it's usually going to be successfully prosecuted.
Well, I can tell you this
But
much.
here's
If someone is saying to me that I'm going to grab this baseball bat and beat the hell out of you and stuff like that because I don't agree with what you're saying to me or what you're doing right now, and then you say, okay, well, before you consider that, let me just let you know that I got a gun, right? I don't think I don't think a jury would say because
No,
I
no,
raised my shirt and
but
showed
again,
I had a gun.
right. You're responding.
That's what I'm saying. So it really
Right. No,
depends.
it's a totally different scenario.
It
but
depends, right? If we're having a normal conversation and you say and you raise your shirt, okay, now we're talking a different thing. So
Yeah.
all I'm saying is that self-defense used to be that you were being attacked in a context where you did not have a chance to get away, and you in defending yourself, you either killed them or severely hurt them, and that's an act of self-defense. We have moved that line. To stand your grounds has moved your line. It used to be, as Coach said, it was about the castle rule and stuff like that. In your house, you do not have to yield.
you don't have to
Absolutely. Okay.
retreat.
You don't have to retreat. I agree. I can see that. I agree with that. Right. But when we have moved it, that's the problem with the Trayvon Martin thing. Now we've moved it out into the street and said, because
Right.
Skippy over here, who security watch over here follows a kid who's feeling threatened. He's following the kid. Right, right. Okay. They get into a tussle after he followed the kid through the neighborhood and stuff like that. The kid is starting to get the better of him. That's when he felt threatened, and then he kills the kid. And he's protected by staying your
But
ground.
here's the
This is
issue. Let me tell you guys. Let me build on something right here. Charlie being the prosecutor, Mark O'Mara being the defense. The premier defense attorney in Orlando may very well be Mark O'Mara, not this giant personal injury attorney out there. The premier guy that every jury is looking at may be Mark O'Mara, the most articulate, the most educated.
okay.
And he literally looks to the jury, as he did when he talks about Trayvon Martin. He says, if you clearly interpret, if you clearly read the stand your ground law, then I forget the kid's name that was the prosecuted, should be acquitted. And now the jury has this huge challenge of understanding the law, not just understanding what happened on the scene. They now have this defense attorney challenging them to understand the law like he does or like he wants to. And then this kid walks free because this premier attorney, and attorneys are pedigrees. This premier attorney says to them, if you want to understand what should be done today, understand the law the way it was written. This kid walks.
Yeah.
And this kid was told to stand down by the police. We got this, buddy. We got this. You just continue to observe if you must to tell us exactly what backyard he's in. But we need to approach him in that backyard. But no, an innocent kid dies. Another kid goes free because of a shitty law in Florida that's now expanding in the right swing, in the right string of the pendulum.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really kind of frustrating when you see that happening in America.
Yeah.
No, it's dangerous.
I
I
agree.
agree.
And we're just, every time we justify everything Trump does because those bleeding heart liberals just want everybody to have free everything and this and that, we're going in the wrong direction in America. Yeah, there's a middle. And we've never seemed to found that middle. I think we did try to find that middle. George Bush just called it a gentler, kinder type of conservative. But we're not there anymore. And it's just
We're not
ridiculous.
We're not there anymore because all these people who sought the middle. Bill Clinton was supposed to be a centrist Democrat. Okay, what did he do to the people he elected? I mean, quite frankly, Bill Clinton he grew up poor in rural Arkansas. He was the white working class, and he came to power and he betrayed the white working class by doing NAFTA, by ratifying NAFTA, by doing welfare reform, by doing the 94 crime bill, on and on and on, by doing the Telecom Act of 96, by repealing Glass-Steagall, by deregulating complex financial instruments. All these things hurt working class people. right? And stuff like that. Okay, George W. Bush comes in. He's supposed to be the kinder, the gentler social conservative and stuff like that, right? Absolutely betrayed the Christian right. David Quo wrote his book as a Christian evangelical, saying that the Bush administration had contempt for them, that they used them as a window dressing in order to do what they wanted to do. And from the conservative perspective, the worst conservative presidency in the history of the country. His 8 budgets tripled federal debt. Tripled federal debt. This is the worst fiscal conservative record in history.
To
Is
date,
George
but
W. Bush.
we're gonna break that record.
Okay. So okay, and then you follow up with Obama. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Who elected Obama? But what does he do? 8 million people lose their homes, do not get bailed out. He makes sure Wall Street gets bailed out.
So
He makes
what
sure
does
that
help the working
AIG.
class American? What
Well,
does? That's the next question. Everybody, one at a time. What would help the working class American? What approach? Would it be so I'll answer it first. I'll take the question and I'll ask the question and I'll answer it first. My personal feeling is a real investment in education over and above the K through 12 system, and not free college, because that gets you nowhere. Because we're at the point now where free college is like the kind of when Jim Carrey played God and everybody won the lottery, and then they're like, well, it's down to $4 now. It's like the jackpot's down to $4 because we got a billion winners and it started at $4 billion. So it's kind of like free college. Everybody's going to every enterprise and applying with a 4-year degree. Everybody's going to every Publix and saying, I want to be a manager. I'm a business executive. I'm a business graduate. So what does help the working class? I'm
We
just trying to get
experienced
it.
it. We experienced it in this. It's called the New Deal. It's called America, notwithstanding segregation from 1950 through
Well, let me
1980.
not interrupt, but let me answer one thing about the New Deal. That is the biggest point of contempt every conservative has for the history of America. It doesn't matter what you throw at them. What they hate the most is the New Deal. So
Yeah, but what
conservatives
what was the
absolutely
conditions?
hate.
Yeah, okay. That's why I love TV and culture and stuff like that. All in the Family, Norman Lear, 1970. Okay, the main character is Everyman. He is the white working class. It's Archie Bunker. Okay, the proof of the pudding of the New Deal is the white working class could afford to own a home in a major American city, right? Can afford to send his daughter to college, right? It had a pension, can take vacations. Okay, what has happened to the working class, right? They can't eat. They are couch shopping. They can't afford to buy a house. They can't. They don't take vacations. They don't have health care. They have no pensions. They have no savings. I mean, this is so. Why do they support Trump? Why do they support anyone who hates the
That is a
establishment?
great question.
Well, because
But what would
Trump,
what? Hang on.
because
Let me
Trump,
ask
like a
Beth. What
marketing
would
guy. No,
help the
Beth, you're
working
right.
American?
Trump, like a marketing guy, tells them, "I'm going to be your guy." And I agree. He's a billionaire. It's ridiculous. What is that? But he's the
Trump
only
has
one
not,
speaking to him.
but Trump has not done anything
I
for the
agree with
working
you,
class.
Beth. I agree with you. But when you have been lied to by Bill Clinton, who was white working class, when you've been lied to by George W. Bush, where did the Tea Party come from? That
But I
wasn't
want
because
to
of
get back to the
Obama. When
question.
you've been lied to by Obama, I'm going to say it. How many times does the working class have to be lied to before
Okay,
they say that they're going to get a radical?
Beth,
They tried to
what would
get
a
Bernie
president
Sanders.
have to do to address the issue of the working class?
We were doing
Well,
it.
certainly not tax them higher and cut corporate taxes. And
I agree with that.
essentially, the tariffs
I
have
agree with that.
put a tax on it's the same tax on every person in America. And there are people who are going to suffer who are at the bottom. Like if I forget what class it was, but they had a map of actually who the top percent of amount, how much the top percent held in the entire nation was wealth, and asked people what they thought the distribution was. And the actual distribution from what people thought it was so far off reality. The top 10% have like 80% of the wealth, and the bottom 10% have like 12 or 2 or something
No, the
ridiculous.
bottom 50%, you have 2%. You're right, Beth. That's right. It's
Yeah, it was a two,
ridiculous.
but to giving corporations that make billions and have been making profits, record profits over the last 8 years since his 2017 tax cuts, that none of that went back to the employees. None of that went back to the working class. Not one penny. Those corporate. So now there's no incentive to give the incentive to make corporations give people a living wage is there's no longer there. There was a congressman or a senator that got in front of people and said, "Hey, my son works and doesn't make a living wage. Not every wage has to be a living wage." Well, if you work a full-time job, that should be a living wage.
Absolutely.
If you don't want a living wage, you don't work full-time. There's this difference in a mindset between what conservatives and what Democrats believe, when I think the American public generally agree a wage, if you work it full time, should be a living wage. There shouldn't be, you know what I mean? There shouldn't be a question. That should just be what it is. And if you don't need a living wage, you don't work full time. But there's no incentive to make corporations give people a living wage, because they're already making record profits. None of that went back to the employees.
Right.
And people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to get by.
Going back to Trippy's initial question, though, in broad general terms, because your question, Trippy, was, what could a leader do? Could a president do? What could our government do to help the working class reestablish what they had in the past? So just about everyone, I think, will agree that the distribution of wealth as it is right now is the problem. How do you fix that and remain, a true democracy and capitalist country? How do you do that? That's the trick, right? I think one of the problems, and Beth was just touching on it too. What can you do to even out the power structure between the stockholders and the people who work at the companies? Because right now it's the investors and the stockholders who have all the power.
All the power.
And the people, and so that's why the distribution of wealth goes the way it does. That if there was an incentive to put more power within the people who actually work in these businesses, you would start to see that even out. But I don't know. I'm not smart enough to give an answer, in what structural way you do that. How do you do that? But again, you got to do that in a manner that is consistent with our short history, because it'll never work if people can turn to it and say it's socialism, or it's you're just giving things away, and you're turning away from a capitalist system. I don't know certainly there's no easy answer, but I think that's the broad problem. It's this power struggle between the investors and the stockholders and the people who actually do the work.
So when I think of all the answers I just got, and they're all great answers, and there really is, like, we essentially agree, there is no answer. But would Archie Bunker
There is an answer, Coach.
Well, let me say this. Would
We
Archie
did it.
Bunker right, but then that's what I was getting to. Would Archie Bunker ever find a way to exponentially grow his wealth? Would he ever?
Well, he was doing it in his home ownership. He was doing it as he paid off his mortgage. That's the primary way of wealth building for most Americans, is to own a house.
But that's all reversed. So the answer is we go back to some sort of logic like that. But where we're at now is, so I don't know what Archie Bunker did for a living. I didn't watch the show.
He was a longshoreman. He was a longshoreman.
Okay, so back then there was a sense of loyalty to your employer, and your employer had a sense of loyalty to you. Yes. So now employers feel like longevity is a virus. We're better off firing old people, and bringing in new broom sweeps clean. Let's bring in a young person. He's younger. He's physically fit. He's going to work a little harder. He's going to have some newfound enthusiasm. We're going to promise him some bullshit story, and he'll believe it for 3 years. And then when he realizes he's gotten nowhere in 3 years, we'll bring in another new guy who don't believe the bullshit story for 3 years. Yeah. But so we've gone away from that, right? And now how do we justify it? Well, the CEOs are justifying it to the stock owners, who are saying, look at these returns you're getting on your stock. But the guy that's doing the work, like the old Facebook meme, hey, that's a great Ferrari, boss. Yeah, great job, worker. And if you keep working like you do, I'll be able to buy a second one. Yeah. Well, you know what? Is it it a point in time where education needs to step in and make people realize you've got to take control of your financial situation some way, somehow? And here's how. There's an investor chief at Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company. His name is Todd Combs. He turned a $70,000 IRA into a $260 million personal fortune and he says the information's out there for everybody. He makes it clear. He said a reporter stumbled on the story. He asked me the questions. I answered them. I watched the Q&A. And he said the information's out there to everybody. It's not. I didn't use insider trading information. I used basic knowledge I had. And I've always suggested that in our schools, we we have some reading. There's a book, Blue Blue Chip Kids, where a dad was telling that he was an investor. Dad was an investor teaching his son about investing. He created a book with charts and pictures and understandings of IRAs and money markets and treasury bills and index funds. And I said maybe, and it's a good book, and it says what every kid should know about financing, and then they cross out the kid in a little artistic way and parent. So and and let's teach our kids about investing. If you can't get your employer to come off some money, maybe investing is the trick. I don't have the answer. I really don't. But we're, like you said, we're at the point where there are no more Archie Bunkers. I mean, I got two kids about to go to college, and we're like, what the, thank God that they'll get some sort of um
It kind of reminds me of this conversation I was having with my wife yesterday. I said, what advice would I give to my younger self or any young person in terms of career and finance? And what I've come to learn and believe in fervently now is that in most aspects, you need 10 years in a particular field to get comfortable financially and have some security to feel like you can actually breathe and work towards your later term life goals. But you need to pick a lane, in your 20s. You have to have this ability for people to commit to some type of business, some type of career. Pick a lane early enough in your mid 20s. So by the time you're in your mid 30s, you'll actually be able to live a little. But it does take some time. It usually obviously there's outliers and there's all kinds of different, stories of people making it big in different ways. But in general, right, people need there needs to be some ability for someone to commit to a career or a business and get that decade under their belt. And then they'll start, seeing the rewards, but it takes the time. And so I think that, some of it is a problem with just, it's not just government and businesses that are a problem. Part of it is also the actions people are taking, and we need to educate people more on even at a younger age of them trying to have a realistic understanding of what their next 10, 20, 15, 20, 30 years are going to be like and how they're going to deal with that. And there's just
Charlie, I hear you.
When we talk about picking a lane, there's three people in this quadroom that picked a lane at a young age, and it was the hospitality business. And it's the wrong lane to pick. And it's a problem because a lot of young people pick that lane. You know why? Because it's fun. Because you make lifelong friends. And you make money. We were making more money than our average friend working construction or at Publix. We were making significantly more money at times. Sometimes more money in a day than they made in a week. But what do you do with that money? That's my question.
That's a different problem, Coach, that I think most Americans would love to have. What do you do with the excess money you make? Because the average, the most people, they have less and less discretionary income. I mean, okay, I have me and my wife, we had our children in our first marriages, so we're second marrieds, right? And so two boys, two girls, college educated, in their 20s, early 30s, and stuff like that. Only one of four of them can sustain themselves independently without support, right? This is the nature of the economy that we're this is the nature of the economy we're dealing with. We have had a situation where if you take a typical business, right, and the business produces a certain amount of revenue, and the question is, from a historical basis, how much of that revenue goes to the people who do the work? And how much does that revenue go to the people who own the company, right? We have had a radical shift in pushing most of that revenue towards the person who owns the company, away from the people who actually do the work, right? Okay, this is what has made life so much harder. Is that when Michael Douglas said greed is good back in the 80s in Wall Street and stuff like that, this was the signal to that the only stakeholder that matters is the shareholder, is the risk taker. That the people who do the work, even your customer, doesn't matter, because the quality of the products and services that we provide are all flavor forward. They look good and stuff like that, but they don't last. The long-term quality, they don't give you the nutrients you need to affect your health over time and stuff like that, but they taste good on the way in, right? We are killing our own customers, or hurting our own customers with crappy shit that looks good and shiny on the way in, and that you have to replace, periodically. And that periodic is getting shorter and shorter and shorter to drive revenues. So what I'm saying here is that this is the fundamental toxicity in our economics. It is not that people don't know how to save their money, or that they don't know how to invest their money. It is that the ability to be able to get paid for the value you actually add, when owners and shareholders are taking most of it. This is where we are. And that
We're
has
at
to
a
change.
we are at a crossroad, because that has changed in some respects. I'm going to bring up this point. I'm probably going to start wrapping it up. In some
Yeah, that's
respects,
good.
that has changed because COVID made people realize they're not as beholden to their employer as they used to be. And the other thing COVID did, and I'm just going to say this because granted this is me thinking out loud, but I strongly believe the other thing people did is made people realize how important the Affordable Care Act is. Because if you walk away from your employer and you no longer have your group health plan, which is what a lot of people in COVID did, they came to realize no matter what crappy condition they were in, they were able to get insurance at a decent rate, not a great rate. And that's why I said the acronym was wrong. The Affordable Care Act should have always been the acronym, should have been the Available Care Act. But you know what? I have always asked the question, has anyone ever told an abused housewife, be glad you have a spouse? Because when employees say, I can't stand my employer no more. I mean, he just fired 4 people and gave me all their work and told me if I want my job, I got to be able to keep up. And people say, well, in this economy, be glad you have a job. No, you know what? Tell that employer to go F himself and carry on with your life. And that's the position people need to be in. Because, like you said, the fact that employers aren't divvying up any part of any sort of real percentage of what's going on in that company, they're keeping 90%, and they're basically abiding by the employment laws of the state by paying you what they pay you, is the bare minimum. Those people need to be in a situation where they can walk away from that job and not just lateral to a new job where they're going to be in the same situation, and the person that left the job they take is moving into their job, because employers remain control under those scenarios. We need to take back control, and we need to realize that that's the biggest contempt conservatives have for the Affordable Care Act, because people really can say, you know what, I've been working at my desk for this, I've been working from my home and for this company for 20 years, I've been eating Cheetos every day sitting by the side of my desk, I've got brittle diabetes, I need my insurance, but now I can have my insurance. Yeah, it won't be cheap. Yeah, it won't be. But it's transitionable. And Trump has made it clear he hates the Affordable Care Act. So he wasn't able to repeal it because they knew he wouldn't replace it. So instead now he's attacked the expansion of Medicaid, and successfully so. So we've got a real issue now that about 9 million people are going to lose their health insurance, but that's the first salvo against the Affordable Care Act. There'll be more Trumpisms on the Affordable Care Act.
Coach,
And
what's the Democrats doing? Because I mean, seriously,
nothing,
that's
nothing.
that's all I'm saying. That's the
And the only
problem.
Democrat that's actually actively doing something, as far as I'm concerned, is us. Well, me, Charlie, and Beth, and then we have we're trying to convince you to
what do you
join.
mean? I can't. What do
You're
you mean?
on the
I've been a
MAGA
Democrat.
side, though.
I've been a Democrat. I voted for Walter Mondale in '84 when I
I
served in
love Jimmy
NATO.
Carter. I said the greatest
Okay,
president. He gave peace a chance.
but the problem is the Democrats left me.
No,
The Democrat, that's all I'm saying. When I look at Joe Biden, what the hell did Joe Biden do I love what he
We
did
own
at
Joe
the,
Biden. We've acknowledged
yeah,
that so many times.
right, okay,
He's
but well, why couldn't Kamala help us? Why couldn't Kamala
she
step
had
out
90
there and
days to
tell?
assemble a national
Well, because
campaign. That was
but yeah, because they rigged the whole damn, they force fed us Joe Biden in the primaries when we wanted someone else, right?
well,
Remember? I
rigged
mean,
implies that they did something that accomplished something. They didn't.
well,
It
they didn't.
didn't work.
The only thing it accomplished is it put them in position to select Kamala Harris and give her a $1.2 billion to run a failed campaign in 90
Well,
days,
it was,
right?
as far as I'm concerned, it was $3 billion to run two failed campaigns because neither candidate impressed me. But the fact of the matter is, yes, if I had a million votes, I would have placed them all for Kamala Harris. But if I had my choice, I would have took that $3 million and sent a check directly to St. Jude's Children's Hospital and told those two idiots, do a podcast or two and tell us what you really believe, and let's save some children in the process with the $3 billion you're about to blow on billboards and Facebook ads.
Well, Coach, all I'm saying is we need a political party in this country, right, who actually will work on behalf of working class people and middle class people in this country. We do not have one. The Democrats they support the professional class, they support Wall Street, right? The
As far as I'm
Republicans
concerned, we're a party of
is
one. The
business.
two parties are inclusion
Yes,
on a lot of crap.
they are.
Crap.
And MAGA is an aberration from that. I mean, the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats, two sides of the same coin, right? MAGA is what Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders revolution would have been coming from, but MAGA is coming from the right. And all I'm saying here is we need someone. I
In
agree.
the
Look what Trump.
middle. Let's meet in
Yes,
the
but
middle.
how are we
I
going to
think
get someone in the middle when the political part, the establishment won't let someone emerge?
Beth,
Won't
let
let
Beth take over.
no, he just nailed it. When people are voting, just talking to different political parties, they want their party to speak for their values. And if they're not, everything a conservative Republican is supposed to be for, and everything that a liberal Democrat is supposed to support, they don't support. They want somebody in the middle, but they don't want to actually vote for that. They don't want somebody to be wishy-washy on their
No, then it's
stances.
considered wishy-washy. Exactly.
You can't take something back once you've given it to somebody. So if we haven't been in power, like I think we were in power, twice since Trump's first? There's not much you can do. I think it was twice.
Right.
It was like a one-seat majority. You can't get a lot passed if you don't have the power. And the Republicans are just really better at getting it.
They're better at the game. They are. They are. They're better at the communication too. They're better at the politics. They're better at it.
Hey, I think everyone on this phone would probably agree that Barack Obama was a high value politician, right? That he was able to inspire a lot of support. The problem is, what did he do with it? I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, all he did with it was then turn around and help Wall Street. I mean, he did not help the working. I mean, if he did that, we would be in a different place.
I think you need to remember, though, when you said people were losing their homes with Obama was cleaning up the mess that Bush made. And Biden was cleaning up the mess that Trump made. All we have done for the last 4 decades is clean up messes. Right.
I agree with that.
I get no credit for it.
But we could help, Beth, we could have helped we could have helped the people, working class people, middle class people who were being crushed. Instead, the only people who got help was the banks.
I agree. Nobody liked that bailout.
Well, yes,
but it was that or economical disaster.
No,
there would not be an economy left if we didn't bail out the banks.
No, there was all that talk. We would have been in a complete collapse.
But Beth, the thing
banks
was,
failed.
It didn't have to be, oh, you only can bail out the bank. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have bailed out the banks, but they could have bailed out the homeowners. They could have bailed out the pensioners who lost 2/3 of their pensions investing in those bullshit.
I completely agree.
Instead, they didn't. This is what I'm saying. Obama was there. This is who elected him.
I felt like he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And when those millionaire bankers took their bonuses after they got bailed out, that's when they came up with the Consumer Protection Agency that Trump just was like,
Just
nope, no
gutted.
such thing.
But
So here's the
Beth,
thing.
we
Obama
could
in
have
his
done
book,
better.
Obama
Yes.
in his book said, especially about what you're talking about, the first 700 billion, when they split it between the two parties, 350, 350, he had to place his hand on the bludgeon knife to stop the bludgeoning. He had to make a deal, or there would have been economic collapse. The deal was, yes, everybody agrees they should have bailed out the individuals, but the conservatives had their hand on the bludgeon knife as well, and they said, no, we're bailing out the banks and the car companies and the this and the that.
But
So
And
then we
as,
didn't need him. We should
as
elect John McCain because that's what he would have done, right?
and
But then
John
as soon as
McCain,
we start helping the family, as soon as we start helping the people, conservatives lose their mind. Like when they were helping students
Yeah.
with their student loans, they lost their minds.
but how
Here's
did
the
They're
John
like,
thing.
McCain lose?
oh, I
But
liked
here's
John McCain.
Everybody liked
yes.
him. How did he lose? Do you realize? Does anybody realize
Obama.
one premise of John McCain? When he ran for the nomination, he ran out of money. He was literally getting on what do you call them? Not private jets, industrial flights with a
Yeah,
gym bag,
commercial flights.
flying to
Yeah,
churches, commercial flights with a
commercial
gym bag
flights.
and a
It's true.
suit and an extra suit and showing up at churches and talking about I want to be the nominee. I
It
mean,
was that pit bull with lipstick. What was her name?
Sarah Palin.
Yes.
Oh
No,
my God.
but and that's one mistake. And you know what the mistake was? He should have did like Trump, prop her up. She's a genius. Look at her. If he would have said something like, she looks great. Every conservative man would have said, I know why he picked her now. I mean anything, but everybody tries to apply this sense of decency and this sense of integrity and this sense of properness. And that's what killed John McCain is he was this good man. We
Yeah.
don't attract good people in politics. And generally the one guy that really confirms that is John McCain. He was this incredible human being. And Trump literally still thumps around the conservative movement bashing
Yeah.
John McCain.
Bashing John
You
McCain.
petty
Yeah.
man. You can't even walk in his shadow. You can't eat the shit off the bottom of his shoe. You're not even 1% of the man he was. He was
I
a
agree with
prisoner
you.
of war for 5 years. They told him, go
Yes.
home. He said, no, I'm not going home. We go home in order of capture. They beat the shit out of him and said, go home. He said, no, I'm not going home. We go home in order of capture. They beat the shit out of him, finally agreed to send somebody else home. That was this great man that we shit on his memory to this day by endorsing Donald Trump and the shit he puts out there. And
Hey,
that's
Coach,
wrong in and of itself.
the saddest thing about John McCain is I think he missed his moment. I don't think his moment was 2008. I think his moment was 2000. If you go back to the 2000 election, he was actually beating George W. Bush. And his campaign essentially went south in South Carolina, where the Bush people put out a rumor that he had an illegitimate black child, right? And this destroyed John. I mean, personally, that really
But the
that's
dirtiness,
ended his
Conservatives
moment.
love that
Could you
conservative
shittiness.
stance.
Yes. Could you imagine if John McCain was president of the United States after Bill Clinton? What a different America that
You
might
would
have
have
been.
you would have had continuity in leadership first of
That's
all,
all I'm just
which is
saying.
all we
But
do every 4 years is switch
yeah,
factories than a Yamaha. You would have had some sort of continuity, and you would have had this incredible growth in America, and you wouldn't have seen the debts you see today. And imagine if we follow the lead of Jimmy Carter and continue to kind of give peace a chance instead of stay
yes.
in the business of war and war. And by the way, this is another war we need to get involved in, and this is another group we need to fund, and this is another group we need to send arms to, and this is another group we need to bomb for. No, there's never been any sort, and that's why we're here today. But guys, we got to wrap it up because we have more to talk about. And believe me when I tell you, I'm going to reach out to all of you, and we're going to do it again.
But Coach, before we go, let's do a quick round robin. Okay, we got the summit with Putin and Trump next Friday. By the time we talk again as a group, right, we're going to have some answers. So everyone just give a prediction as to what do you think is going to come out of it. I'll start. In my opinion, they're going to come up with an agreement. 4 or 5 provinces are going to go to Russia, and they're going to present Zelensky with the ultimatum. Take it or leave it, or Russia is going to be allowed to do what they're going to do because the United States is pulling back. That's my prediction. Charlie, Beth, what do you think is going to happen next Friday?
I said basically what you just said earlier.
Exactly.
But
I agree
absolutely,
with both y'all.
Trump is going to make his decision with what he thinks is right, and he's going to force it on Zelensky.
No, I have to agree. I agree.
gonna come
I
out that
don't
way.
I don't know that there's going to be some ultimatum where they give any amount to Zelensky. I think Putin is going to get pretty much whatever he wants, and Trump's going to come. He's going to go with it.
And Europe's going to fall in place as well.
Not that I think that anything that is told to us is going to be actually accurate from what they were.
No, it's going to be a
It's true,
bullshit
Beth.
story.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
exactly right, Beth.
It's going to be a total bullshit story, and
Yeah.
Europe's going to fall into line as well. And that's going to be that. And if the bloodshed stops, you know what? Let it be. Because,
Yeah,
at this
I
point,
agree.
if the bloodshed stops, if one less child dies because of this
Yes.
agreement, I agree with the agreement.
Okay, that's a great point to end it on, Coach.
All right, guys, like,
Yeah, we were
share,
all
subscribe.
in agreement.
Oh,
Can
my
you believe
goodness.
it?
This got better than the best.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Like, share, subscribe, comment. Political no-brainer. Kevin's book. What is it?
Onward at last.
Onward at
Woo!
last.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, guys. See ya
You
in
take care. Be
2
well.
to 3
See you in a
weeks.
couple
Yeah.
I'll be
weeks.
texting
Hey.
everybody.
All right.